are not beside the cross.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Inna alhamdulillahi nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa na'udzu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlil fala hadiya lahu. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Allahumma salli ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa sallam. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربي زدني علما ربي زدني علما ربي زدني علما ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير آمين يا رب العالمين. So last time we started discussing the Medinan era and we talked about the first purpose-built masjid that was built by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is Masjid-e-Quba. And the virtue of Masjid-e-Quba is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that whoever does wuzu at his house and then goes to Masjid-e-Quba and prays 2 rakat will get the reward of a full umrah. And that is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would ride every week to Masjid-e-Quba to pray there, and it would normally be on a Monday. And we also mentioned that after Hijrah, the first few installments of Surah Baqarah were revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Surah Baqarah talks in a lot about the Bani Israel, the Jews, Musa alayhi salam, and this was the time that the Muslims had to know about the Jews because they had come into contact with the Jews in Medina. So hence Surah Baqarah was revealed to inform them about the Jews, the Bani Israel, and Musa alayhi salam. And we talked about formalizing the prayer, and the azan was instituted, and the Treaty of Medina was written, and the change of Qibla was a big change. A first abrogation was the change of the Qibla. And we are doing, we did talk about Nasakh in our tafsir class as well, and this was the first abrogation. And there are many wisdoms of the change of Qibla. For the Muslims, it was a test to see whether they implemented the new ruling from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and of course they did. For the Jews, this was a clear sign or message because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came in the line of their prophets. So he was facing the Qibla. But now his Qibla, his religion, his book will supersede, his prophethood shall now supersede the prophethood of the previous Anbiya, and he shall take it back to the original, that is monotheism. So the purpose primarily was to demonstrate to the Jews that this prophet is from the same tradition as their religion, but he's not just a Jewish prophet. He's more than this. He's a prophet for mankind. And remember, the Jews think they are the chosen people, but Allah wanted to demonstrate that the status would not now cease primarily through the change of Qibla. And it was even a message for the pagans, for the mushrikun. They are not worthy of being the custodians of the Kaaba. Rather, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is more worthy, and he will be the one who inherits the Kaaba and resurrects the prestige that it had in the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And we mentioned about the Masjid-e-Qiblatain, where where the Qibla was changed, and halfway through the Salah, the Sahaba-i-Karam changed their direction. The first prayer that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed facing the Kaaba in Medina, some say it was the Zuhr, some say it was the Asr. But he did not change direction midway. He already knew. He prayed the whole Salah in the direction of the Qibla. And there was one Sahabi who witnessed this. He went to his tribe while they were praying Salat Asr, and they changed mid direction to the new Qibla. And another interesting story that is mentioned, that I did not mention last time, but that is mentioned in the books of Seerah, is about Sirma, the Hanif of Medina. We learn that around the time when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated to Medina, there was an elderly man who was known by the name of Sirma, and he was the only Hanif in Medina. Who is Hanif? Hanif is a person who has abandoned idolatry, and he says that he would follow the monotheistic religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So there was this one Hanif in Medina, and he had Allah Ta'ala blessed him to convert to Islam at his old age, and he waited for 120 years for the truth, and Allah Ta'ala stretched his life out to give him this blessing of being a Sahabi and of those who saw and lived with Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam because of their sincerity. And this shows that those who are sincere, Allah Ta'ala will bless them in that sincerity. And he converted to Islam. And then shortly after, he passed away. Then we also mentioned about the Treaty of Medina, and it is called Misake Medina, and most scholars divide this document into two distinct parts. The first part of this treaty is the understanding among the followers of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the rulings for the Muslims. And the second part is a truce between the Muslims and the Jews. And all early sources, including Ibn Ishaq and Al-Waqidi, referred to it as the Muwada, which means cessation of hostilities. And the Pact of the Believers, the first half of the Kitab, is far better attested than the latter half about the truce with the Jews. And we talked about the building of Masjid-e-Nabawi as well. And there is one interesting story while the Masjid-e-Nabawi was being built, and it is about Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu an, while they were building Masjid-e-Nabawi. So Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu an was carrying two large bricks or two large stones, and his entire body was dusted in full. And he was struggling to carry them. So he jokingly said to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, "Oh, Ya Rasulullah, they are killing me by giving me two stones, and they are only carrying one stone." So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he heard this, he smiled and he said that, "O son of Sumayya." Remember, Ammar radiallahu anh was the son of Sumayya and Yasir radiallahu anh, and they were the first martyrs of Islam. So he said that, "O son of Sumayya, they are not killing you. Rather, the people who shall kill you will be al-fiyatul baghiya." The Arabic is written the other way around. I'll correct it later. Al-fiyatul baghiya, the group that has gone beyond the bounds. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also said, "Everyone is getting one reward and you are getting two, and the last thing you shall drink in this world will be a glass of milk." Now, what does that mean when the fitna arose amongst the believers, and there was one group led by Ali radiallahu anh and the other group led by Muawiyah radiallahu anh? And Ammar bin Yasir was on the side of Ali radiallahu anh, and that side was on Haqq. And he was martyred in this battle, in this fitna. And the Sahaba Karam at that time used to see at what side was Ammar radiallahu anh, so that they know that they are on the side of Haqq. So this is just one interesting bit about Ammar bin Yasir, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself had prophesied that he would be killed by the rebellious group. All right. Now, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had paired each muhajir that had come from Makkah to Medina with the Ansar. So, of the early things that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, so much so that one of the earlier scholars said he did this even before Masjid Nabi was built. He made a muwaqa. Muwaqa, this word comes from akhi, which means brother in Arabic. He made a muwaqa between the Muhajirun and Ansar, despite the fact that he had already encouraged the Ansar to be generous to the Muhajirun, and they were very generous. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam paid every single male Muhajir with an Ansari. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anh was paired with Kharija ibn Zayd, and Abdul Rahman ibn Auf was paired with Saad ibn al-Rabi, and there are other examples as well. But as the number of immigrants continued to increase, there were not enough Ansar to continue the Muwaqa system for everyone. So what happened was that the new arrivals now would base themselves in Masjid Nabi, and they came to be known as the people of the Suffa, the Ahle Suffa. And their numbers would fluctuate between 5 and 70, and most of them would stay for a short period of time. They would learn the fundamentals of Islam and then leave. However, Sufa soon became a hub of knowledge and faith, and some members would voluntarily remain to learn from there and interact with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So most of them were bachelors, but some family men would also opt to stay in the Sufa over their own families in order to be close to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and to the Prophet's mosque, which was kind of a university for them, where they would learn directly from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Ahle Sufa were highly respected because they sacrificed everything for the sake of Allah. And many of them had nothing but the clothes on their backs. And it was even narrated that the Sahabiyat, the female companions, would complain to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that the aura of some of the young men would be exposed when they prostrated in Salah, as their clothes were not even long enough to cover their whole bodies. And I'm sure you would have heard this story that Fatima radiallahu anha once complained to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about her household chores and asked for a servant to help her. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied that how can I give you a servant when the stomachs of Ahle Sufa are collapsed from hunger? And then Fatma radiallahu anha never asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for a servant again. And these Ahle Sufa, they became the flag bearers of knowledge and piety, and they became memorizers and masters of the Quran to the extent that they were known as the people of the Quran. And in fact, the Ahle Sufa were the indirect cause of the compilation of the Quran into a single book. So the Quran was passed down from Allah to Rasulullah via Jibreel alayhi salam orally, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in turn taught the companions orally. And the entirety of the Quran was written down on pieces of bone and leather and parchments, but only as a tool of memorization. However, many years later, during the Khilafah of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh, the apostasy wars against Musaylama, the liar, inflicted many casualties among the Muslims, and many of the Huffaz were martyred. And Umar radiallahu anh then pleaded with Abu Bakr radiallahu anh to compile the Quran before more people of the Quran were lost. And Abu Bakr eventually, radiallahu anh, eventually obliged. And the most famous Ahle Sufa that we know of was Abu Huraira radiallahu anh. Abu Huraira, the word means, the title means the father of kittens, as he would famously carry a small kitten in his sleeve. And he came from a middle class family, yet sacrificed his luxuries to accompany Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he stayed in the Masjid Nabawi and was one of the Ahle Sufa. And he suffered from extended bouts of hunger and fatigue for the sake of this closeness. And later he would recall, and this is Abu Huraira radiallahu anh saying himself, that many times I would ask companions question as they walked home, as they were leaving Masjid Nabawi and walking home. And by Allah, I knew the answer better than them. But I would ask in the hope that the conversation would extend until they reached their house and they would perhaps invite me in to eat. So imagine the hunger and the talab that the Sahaba Karam had to learn from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And remember that Abu Huraira radiallahu anh was from Yemen and he only came to Medina after the 7th year of Hijrah. Yet he narrated the most ahadith of all the companions, and he narrated around 1,236 individual ahadiths. And the successors would often ask how Abu Huraira knew so much, despite the fact that he converted to Islam in the 7th year of Hijrah. So that means he had a shorter time with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Abu Huraira radiallahu anh replied that the people complain that I narrate too many hadiths, but were it not for the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala criticized those who withhold knowledge, I would not have narrated a single hadith. As for the Muhajirun, they were busy buying and selling in the souks of Medina, in the markets of Medina. And as for the Ansar, they were busy cultivating and harvesting their fields. As for me, I would stick to the Prophet ﷺ with an empty stomach, and therefore I would memorize what they would not. So this is why Abu Huraira radiallahu anh had memorized so many ahadith, his love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his love for knowledge, for gaining knowledge from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we have this hadith that I just mentioned about Abu Huraira replying that how he knew so many hadiths. This comes in Sahih Bukhari. And the verse that Abu Huraira radiallahu anh was referring to, that those who withhold knowledge, is in Surah Baqarah, ayah number 159. All right. Now, as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam finally established a base in Medina, a Muslim society began to be formed, and most major pillars of Islam, except for Hajj, which required access to Makkah, were established within the first year of the new state, and the basic rulings of Salah were perfected. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Pray as you have seen me pray." And we learn this hadith also from Sahih Bukhari. And the rulings of tahara, purification, including wazu, ghusl, istinja, they were all revealed. Fasting was gradually introduced. The first obligated fast was the 10th of Muharram, 9 months after the Hijrah. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam decreed that whoever ate breakfast in the morning, let him fast for the rest of the day. And the following Ramadan was then obligatory to fast. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also began implementing societal reforms. and the first of which was to demarcate a new souk to establish financial independence. So his Ansar were historically engaged in agriculture while the marketplaces were run by the Jews. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam visited these marketplaces and disapproved of many practices such as cheating, deception, and high levies. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then said to the Muslim, "This is not a souk for you." And he then walked back to the masjid and created lines in the sand with his own blessed feet and said, "This shall be your souk. Let it not be diminished and let no one tax the people in it." And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam encouraged a free and open market for the Muslims so their businesses may thrive. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also then said, "Whoever cheats is not from me, that is my ummah." And then he banned the practice of trading with riba as commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam even forbade the Medinan Muslims from representing Bedouins in the souk, as it was a common practice for locals to exploit uninformed Bedouins and travelers. So this is how the society gradually came into existence. Now, the tensions started to reignite with the Quraysh, and the Muslims struggled immeasurably in Makkah and were forced to remain patient. They were abused and oppressed with no respite. And the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could have ordered someone to kill the likes of Umayyah ibn Khalaf for torturing Bilal radiallahu anh, but he was not allowed to engage in any sort of altercation. And the first verse of jihad in the Quran was revealed later. And in Makkah, jihad was forbidden. And later on, the verse for jihad was revealed in Surah Hajj. Now, there were 4 primary stages of jihad in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The first was jihadul nafs. Military jihad was forbidden, but jihad was against your own nafs, of being patient and forbearing. The second stage where jihad was permitted, but as self-defense only. The third stage was where jihad was made obligatory against the Quraysh only, and then finally jihad was mandated against all tribes of Arabia. So once the command for jihad was given, to the Muslims following Surah Hajj, the Muslims embarked on a series of expeditions. And the primary goal of these expeditions was to demonstrate to the Quraysh that the Muslims were not submissive and defeated. They were an independent political and military force. And the secondary reason for these expeditions was to strangle the Quraysh's imports and exports. Because Makkah's centrality had made itself an economic powerhouse. So a tertiary goal was to expand the Islamic State by forming alliances with nearby tribes. Now, there were 2 types of expeditions. One was Ghazwa. The plural of Ghazwa is Ghazawat, which is any battle that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam attended. And the second was Sariyah. The plural of Sariyah is Saraya, which is any battle that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded but did not attend. And Buraidah radiallahu anh narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam attended 19 ghazawat and physically fought in 8 of them. They were the battles of Badr, Ohad, Muraysiya, Ahzab, Khaybar, Qadid, and Hunain. As for the Saraya, there were many, and Ibn Ishaq lists that there were 30 Saraya, Al-Waqidi counts 48, Ibn al-Jawzi notes 56, and so on. So the discrepancies are due to differences in deciding what constitutes a Sariyah. But by all counts, there were at least 30 Sariyah. And the first military expedition was called Al-Abwa, which took place on the 12th of Safar in the second year of Hijrah. So 9 months after the Hijrah was the first military expedition. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard that a caravan from the Quraysh was exposed and the Muslims set off to raid it. They did not catch the caravan, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made alliances with the tribes surrounding Medina called the Banu Damra, and the Islamic State expanded for the first time. In the second expedition, they encountered the enemy, but there were no casualties as a third party quashed the conflict. Nonetheless, Saad ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anh made history by shooting the first arrow for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The next expedition was Ghazwa al-Ushaira, which would prove to be a defining moment in Islamic history. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took around 150 companions to raid the Quraysh's annual caravan heading to Syria. So, we knew that Quraysh were merchants, they were businessmen, and they would regularly travel to Syria for trade purposes. So their annual caravan, it held over 70% of the wealth in Makkah, including over 70 camels and much more. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had intended to intercept the caravan, but they were not able to cross paths. However, a member of the Quraysh had accidentally strayed from the caravan and saw the Muslims approaching. Now, this allowed him to warn Abu Sufyan, the leader of the caravan of the Quraysh. Now, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not know that the Quraysh knew of their approach, and Abu Sufyan used this to his advantage. He sent an envoy to Makkah to mobilize an army. In the meantime, one of the allies of the Quraysh ambushed Medina at night, stole some camels, and killed some camel herders. Now, as soon as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard, he mobilized 70 companions, but the men fled. Which men fled? The one who ambushed Medina. Now, this was referred to as the first Battle of Badr, or the small Battle of Badr, as it took place on the plains of Badr, but though no actual fighting took place here. Now, after failing to intercept the Quraysh traveling northbound, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent 8 Muhajirun southbound to observe the Quraysh traveling to Yemen, nominating his cousin Abdullah ibn Jahash as the leader. Now, they were all Muhajirun. All 8 of them were Muhajirun, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was keen to remind that Makkah was taken from them and that their fight was not over. He wrote a letter and told them to travel for 2 days before opening the letter, which instructed them to abruptly change directions and enter Makkah. Now, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's secrecy and caution in this regard is a clear indication of the importance of discretion and tactics in warfare. And the letter also instructed Abdullah ibn Jahash not to force any of his 7 companions to accompany him into Makkah, owing to the extremely high risk of the operation. And assuming certain death, Abdullah ibn Jahash said, "Whoever of you is eager for martyrdom and wishes to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala soon, let him come with me. And whoever does not may return to Medina." So he warned his fellow companions. And this hadith about Abdullah ibn Jahash saying them is recorded by At-Tabari in his book Tarikhul Rasul wal Muluk. And guess what? When he said this to the companions, they all accompanied him and continued onwards, and the expedition was called Sariya al-Nakhla. Now they had 4 camels between 8 of them. And this shows the scarcity of resources in early Islam. And one of their camels escaped in the night. So Saad bin Abi Waqas and Utbah ibn Ghazwan remained in this desert while the remaining 6 continued to Makkah. As they arrived in the desert grove of Nakhla, on the outskirts of Makkah, they saw a small business caravan loaded with merchandise, and they were faced with a dilemma. This raid would be extremely profitable for the Ummah, but Rasulullah sent them to gather information, not to fight. Moreover, it was the 30th of Rajab, a sacred month, which means there was 1 hour left before fighting was permissible. So still fighting was not permissible. There was still an hour to go. They debated among themselves, but the opportunity was so tempting that they decided to pounce. And they attacked and killed 1 guard, Amr al-Hadrami, captured 2 more as prisoners of war, and returned to Medina. When they returned to Medina, Rasulullah was displeased with their actions. He reprimanded them and refused to accept any of the war booty, saying, I did not send you to fight in the sacred month, as fighting was prohibited in Rajab, and I did not send you to fight in the sacred month, again reported by Tabari. Now the Quraysh reveled in this mistake. They proliferated the news of this event and spread their criticisms of the Muslims throughout the whole of Arabia. So they capitalized on this mistake, and they accused them of violating the sanctity of the sacred months and transgressing the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And Rasulullah felt great stress over these accusations, as they contained elements of truth. They had done what they shouldn't have done. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then revealed the ayat. They ask you about fighting in the sacred months. Say fighting during these months is a great sin, but preventing people from the path of Allah, rejecting Him, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and expelling the worshippers from the sacred mosque is a greater sin in the sight of Allah, and fitna is far worse than killing. And this is the ayah of Surah Baqarah, ayah number 217. After this verse was revealed, Rasulullah accepted the war booty and requested ransoms for the prisoners of war. However, he stipulated that he will not release them until Saad ibn Abi Waqas and Utbah ibn Ghazwan return safely. Because you remember their camel had strayed and had wandered off, and they remained and sent the 6 ahead. So, however, these 2 companions, they were not captured. They were still in the desert and eventually returned safely. And Rasulullah then released the hostages. And one of them, Al-Hakam ibn Kaysan, accepted Islam and returned to Rasulullah on his own accord, but only after ransom reached Rasulullah. All right. Now, after this, Rasulullah sent several scouts to observe the Quraysh's caravan returning southbound. Talha ibn Ubaidillah and Saad ibn Zayd reported its magnitude, which constituted one of the biggest caravans in the history of Arabia. Now, the reports do not state why the caravan was so large Uh, However, the fact that the immigrants had left their wealth and possessions in Makkah before migrating is a strong indicator as to why this caravan was particularly large and vibrant. Now, intercepting this caravan would therefore be hugely important, as it would bring the Meccan economy uh, to a halt, while simultaneously it would empower the Muslims, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was cognizant of this fact. After the caravan was located, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made an urgent announcement in Masjid Nabwi, and according to a report in Sahih Muslim, he did not inform the companions of the details. Instead, he said that we have a mission to undertake, so whoever has his camel ready shall come with me. So whoever has his camel ready shall accompany us. He did not say anything more than that. Some of the companions asked to go and retrieve their camels, and the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam refused, stating that he must leave immediately. So there is no time that you will go and then prepare your camel. Only those who have their camels prepared. And the report in Ibn Ishaq states that he explicitly mentioned that they were heading to the Quraysh's caravan. Now, as they set up camp, Rasulullah was finally able to assess his group and plan accordingly that who was there, who was available, who was not for this expedition. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent back two young people who had come to participate, Al-Bara ibn Azib and Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anh, who was the son of Umar Khattab radiallahu anh, as they were both below the age of 15, which was the cutoff point for combat. So you should be above 15. So in Islam, we know that the age of puberty is designated as the age of intelligence and responsibility. In modern times, 15 is very young. However, Islam dictates that humans are accountable from the age of puberty. So 15-year-olds were considered men and women at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as well as throughout most of human history. Now, this convoy was not prepared for war, as the sole aim was to raise a trade caravan. And the whole group had the whole group had two riding horses, 100 camels, and minimal armor and weaponry. And each camel was shared by three people, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam shared his camel with Ali ibn Abi Talib and Abu Lubaba radiallahu anh. And they both insisted that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam take the camel for himself and that they would walk, but Rasulullah provided a very uh, beautiful response to them. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "The two of you are not any younger or stronger than me, and nor am I any less in need of reward." So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is as much in need of reward as anybody else. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam could have easily accepted the offer. And even from a political standpoint, the leader is expected to receive a higher level of prestige. Nevertheless, he displayed his humility, for which he was known, and he was also setting a prophetic example for his followers, such that the likes of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh was mistaken for a servant when he was a Khalifa, because he entered Jerusalem on full foot while his servant was on horseback. So this is our prophetic legacy. And this legacy, it continued throughout the leadership and mentorship of his successors. Now, after the close call of Quswai al-Ushaira, Abu Sufyan heightened his defense and he sent counter spies to observe the spies of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one of his scouts spotted two men, and Abu Sufyan began to investigate. And he even analyzed the camel dung left behind and noticed Medinan date seeds, realizing that they were Muslim soldiers. So, from the dung of the camel, he found Madani date seeds, and he realized that they were Muslim soldiers. And indeed, they were Talha ibn Ubaidullah and Sa'id ibn Zayd. And as soon as he realized, he ordered the caravan to take an unknown route to avoid an ambush. And he then sent his fastest rider, Damdam ibn Amr al-Ghifari, to race back to Makkah and call for reinforcements. So, Abu Sufyan got to know this through his spies, that the Muslims were coming to raid the caravan. So he changed his route, and not that he changed his route, he even sent a rider to inform the Makkans and asked for reinforcements. So while Damdam, this man, was racing back, the inhabitants of Makkah were already sensing tension. Now, a very interesting dream is reported in the books of Seerah. The aunt of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Atika binte Abdul Muttalib, that means the puppy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, had a dream 3 days before Damdam's arrival. And she called Abbas radiallahu anh and informed him that she dreamt that a crier would come to Makkah racing on his camel, shouting, "O traitors, meet your death in 3 days." The crier repeated the same sentence on top of the Kaaba and again on top of Mount Abu Qubais, the highest point in Makkah. And the crier then picked up a large boulder and toppled it over the mountain. And as the rock reached the base, it splintered into several rocks, hitting every single house in Makkah. So this was the dream that Atika had, and this dream we learn from Ibn Hisham in his book Al-Seerah Al-Nabawiyah. Now, obviously, Abbas radiallahu anh, he wasn't a Muslim at that time. It worried him, and he urged Atika to keep it a secret. However, he contradicted his own advice, and he ended up telling this dream to Walid ibn Utbah, who was sworn to secrecy but still told his father Utbah. Eventually, the entire Makkah was gossiping about this deadly dream. And as Abbas was performing tawaf, Abu Jahl ambushed him and asked him that, "O children of Abdul Muttalib, since when did you get a female prophetess?" So very sarcastically he asked Abdul Muttalib, and Abu Jahl then threatened that if the prediction does not come true, the Banu Hashim would be publicly shamed as the liars of Makkah. Now, Abbas was caught off guard, so he denied everything. But before he even returned to the house, the women of Banu Hashim began chastising him and accusing him of failing to defend his own womenfolk. So obviously he was embarrassed, and the next morning Abbas headed out to rebuke Abu Jahl to restore his honor. However, Abu Jahl turned away in shame and could not even bear to face him. It was the 3rd day after the dream that the Damdam arrived. He was seen racing into Makkah screaming. He mutilated his horse for dramatic effect, cutting off its nose as a symbolic cry for help, and blood rushed down its face as Damdam yelled, "O Quraysh, your caravan, your property and wealth with Abu Sufyan are being attacked by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions. Help!" He was calling them to their wealth, but as Atika predicted, he was calling them to their death. And the Damdam's dramatic plea rallied the Quraysh, and they mobilized 1,300 men in a single day. Every single household in Makkah sent at least one fighter, if not more, again corroborating Atika's dream. But there was a strange feeling amongst the Quraysh, and the worst of them feared death the most, as they know how badly they had treated Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Abu Lahab found a way out and did not attend, sending Al-As ibn al-Wail in his stead. Al-As owed Abu Lahab a large sum of money, and Abu Lahab offered to forgive the entire loan if he went and fought on his behalf. And now, it is not explicitly stated why Abu Lahab did not attend, though it is perhaps a combination of cowardice and a conflicted feeling of fighting his own tribe. Utbah ibn Rabia also hesitated in attending for the same reasons, but his brother Sheba reminded him that if they did not attend, they would be humiliated upon their return. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed that they did not return as they marched to their deaths. Of those who also desperately tried to avoid attending was Umayyah ibn Khalaf, the abuser of Bilal radiallahu anh. He was obese in stature with no fighting skills whatsoever, so he paid a man to fight on his behalf. However, he was of the most senior figures of the Quraysh, and his absence would be a blow to their morale. So Abu Jahl tried to encourage him, and he encouraged him through all means and by way of sarcasm and teasing him, and eventually he agreed to go. And we all know that they were both led to their death by going to Medina, marching to war. So we will pause here for today, inshallah, and we will carry on next time. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Jazakallah khair for listening. Inshallah, we'll carry on with Shama'il tomorrow.